Hello, and many blessings to you all today. My name is Jermaine Felton, and today's reading comes out of John, the 21st chapter, verses 1 through 25. In this final chapter of the book of John, we'll be reading about Jesus appearing to the seven disciples, and Jesus challenges Peter. With that being said, let's start today's reading. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the two other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in their boat, but they caught nothing at all. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach. The disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your nets on the right side of the boat, and you'll get some." So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. The disciples Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and headed to shore. The other stayed with the boat and pulled a low net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. So what we see here in verse 7 is that only John the disciple Jesus loved recognized Jesus in the dim morning light. Undoubtedly because Jesus had performed a similar miracle. We see this in Luke 5, verses 1 through 11. Let's continue. Bring some of the fish you have just caught," Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to the shore. There were 153 large fish, yet the net hadn't torn. Now come and have some breakfast," Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to the disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After the breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs." Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep." Jesus said a third time, he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." So Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." So we see in verse 17 that in this beach scene, Jesus led Peter through an experience that would remove the cloud of his denial. Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loved him. When Peter answered yes, Jesus told him to feed his sheep. It is one thing to say you love Jesus, but the real test is willingness to serve him. Peter's life changed when he finally realized who Jesus was. His occupation changed from fisherman to impetuous to a rock, and his relationship to Jesus changed. He was forgiven and finally understood the significance of Jesus' word about his death and resurrection. And let's continue. I tell you the truth, when you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and others. You will dress you and take you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to let him know by what kind of death he would glorify God. That Jesus told him, "Follow me." So we see verse 18 and 19 that this was a prediction of Peter's death by crucifixion. Tradition indicates that Peter was crucified for his faith, upside down because he did not feel worthy of dying as his Lord did. Despite what Peter's future held, Jesus told him to follow him. We may be uncertain and fearful about our future, but if we know God is in control, we can confidently follow Christ. Let's continue. Peter turned around and saw something behind them. The disciples Jesus loved, the one who had leaned over to Jesus Supper and asked, Lord, who will betray you? Peter asked Jesus, what about him, Lord? And Jesus replied, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, follow me. So the rumors spread among the community of believers that this disciple wouldn't die. But that isn't what Jesus said at all. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? So we see here in verse 21 and 22, Peter asked Jesus how John would die. Jesus replied that Peter should not concern himself with that. We tend to compare our lives to others, whether to rationalize our own level of devotion to Christ or to question God's justice. Jesus responded to us as he did to Peter. What is that to you? As for you, follow me. And let's continue. This disciple is the one who testifies to these events, and he has recorded them here. And we know that his account of these things is accurate. Jesus also did many other things. If they were all written down, I suppose the whole world could not contain the book that would be written. So we see in verse 23 that early church history reports that after John spent several years as an exile on this island of Patmos, he returned to Ephesus, where he died as an old man near the end of the first century. In verse 25, John stated purpose for writing his gospel was to show that Jesus was the Son of God. We see this in John 20:31. He clearly and systematically presented the evidence for Jesus' claims. When evidence is presented in the courtroom, those who hear must make a choice. Those who read the Gospel of John must also make a choice. Is Jesus the Son of God or isn't he? You are the jury. The evidence has been clearly presented to you. You must decide. Read John's Gospel and believe. And that's where we complete today. I hope that everyone enjoyed today's reading. And tomorrow we'll be starting the book of Acts. And I just hope that everyone has a blessed day.